Paulina.
Hey, Megan.
What book are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to be talking about The Creative Spark, how imagination made humans exceptional by Agustin Fuentes.
Could you give us a brief summary of this book?
Yeah, sure. I would describe it as a resynthesis of modern evolutionary data about humans that highlights specifically the creative and collaborative aspects of our evolution. Do you remember one particular thing that stood out to you? Like, what was one thing that you really liked about the book?
Oh, there was one part that it made me just go, yes, that's what I've been waiting for. So it was in the midst of all of this very technical discussion about types of hominids and lineages and all of this. And then the book started talking about how the one of the things that was created in the process of us becoming us was the concept of compassion, and the
Oh,
places that you start to see the idea of compassion within the evolutionary record, and
mhm.
not just the examples that we hear a lot as archaeologists about specific sets of remains that are found, but also this idea that certain behaviors that we take for granted as far as cooperation and as far as communication couldn't have happened without the idea of compassion. And I really enjoyed how that was contrasted against the later sections of the books where they talk about the human capacity for violence,
Mm.
and this idea that we arose because of compassion and we have violence, but violence occurs actually within such a small segment of the 7 billion people that we have on Earth. I thought that
Yeah,
was just, I love finding that sort of thing in more hard sciencey archaeological, anthropological literature. Did you
yeah.
have something in it that you really enjoyed?
One of the things I absolutely loved was sort of ending section where Fuentes brought in like a list of things that you can do with people that are collaborative and creative to just kind of rehumanize us. Because I think there's a section of the book where he kind of talks about like the ways that our culture has kind of gone away from celebrating collaborative action, which is such an important part for creativity. And he goes back to just suggest these like little things that you can do with people that bring that back in. And particularly, it was something as like cooking together, eating together, and particularly because I was finishing up this book when we were still like pretty heavily in sort of like lockdown era sort of stuff. I guess content warning, pandemic discussion. That the idea of doing something as simple as like eating with a friend or cooking with a friend was super impactful. It was super meaningful, as not only just like a cool thing to do, but actually as something that is like part of our heritage and part of our lineage. That like this is something that kind of helped us to become what we are now, both as individuals, but also kind of as a species, which was really, really cool. Was there anything else that stood out for you for the book? Because I've got like one other point that I thought was really cool, but what was something else that might have stood out for you?
So there was an example that the author gave in talking about cooperation,
Hmm.
and it really struck home for me as I live in the UK. And it was the idea of people standing in line or people waiting in a
Hmm.
queue, and how there's no other there's no other organism, there's no other group of creatures on Earth that do this, that have this idea um, that sometimes you have to wait for someone else, and you have to wait in a long line for them, and that we do this, that we accept that sometimes you just have to stand in line behind someone else. I just found that I love those examples where you can take away something that comes from a really deep scientific analysis of behavior and evolution, and you can put it right into an example of your own life.
Hmm.
I thought that was fascinating. Made
Yeah,
me
no,
smile.
that's awesome. Yeah.
How about
Um,
you?
oh, one other thing that I thought was really cool about the book was that the author was really upfront about the ways that modern cultural sort of themes and beliefs influence our interpretation of basically hard science, particularly different sorts of like ideologies about the value of sort of individualism and that sort of stuff influenced how we actually interpreted the fossil record. And I thought that that was just a really interesting thing that he kind of pointed out, that like, oh, hey, you know, during this era, we had these beliefs and that kind of impacted how we were able to interpret stuff. And I think as a student of archaeology, we do learn that. But I think to have it be in a book that's so accessible for the public was really, really cool. And to be really upfront about it, that like, yeah, no, how we believe in society does impact to a certain degree how we're able to understand things. And I thought that that was just a really, really important um, aspect of the work.
Yeah.
So, Megan, we've talked about what the book is about, some really cool points in it. But how do you think this book fits the theme? What is archaeology?
I mean, this fits classically into our theme. What is archaeology? I think um, some of the first things that people in the non archaeological public think about when they think of archaeology are, you know, fossils and remains and things like that. I think it fits neatly into there beyond that generalization, because it gets to the kind of archaeology that I like to do, which is not necessarily object centered, but people centered. That
Mhm.
it's archaeology um, about the bigger picture, and how we fit into that as individuals. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed this book for that reason.
Mhm.
How about you?
Super cool. Um, I think that yeah, it very classically fits this idea of like an archaeology book.
Mhm.
It talks about, you know, like early stone tool manufacture and all of that stuff. But I think that he also really kind of revives that narrative by bringing a very this is a pretty recent book, not the most recent, but a pretty recent book on the
Yeah.
topic. Um, and he also really brings in a lot of concepts that are ones that just still get lost in the overall narrative of archaeology, particularly this idea that like creativity is something we should value, and like
Hmm.
collaboration is something that we should value because it's like
Yeah.
how we got here. And I
Yeah.
think it does a really great job of compassionately taking apart this idea of an individualistic narrative. And I just really like that, like that's such a central part of this book, that it's still very hard sciencey. You're talking about like dating and how we have evidence and what that evidence is and all of that stuff. But it also is like, no, like creativity is not something additional. It's not a bonus. It's part of us in this really important way. And I like that it brings that back. It's very much a kind of a STEM book with a STEAM theme. So
I
STEM,
love that. I love
um,
the way you put that.
yeah, it's science, technology, engineering, and math. And a lot of people have talked about like why not art too. And so, well, maybe not why not art too, but why aren't we considering art as part of that? And so it's STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And I think that that's such an important part of it, is because you cannot do any of those things without creativity. Like you have to have that ability to play. And I think that this book is really, it's about archaeology, it's about the hard sciences, but it really has this theme of play and arts and creativity that I think is absolutely fantastic to see in a book that's available for the public, to talk about archaeology. If folks liked this book, Megan, what are some pieces that you would recommend that they consume alongside it?
So there is a series by Adrian Tchaikovsky that is called the Children of Time series, and it's science fiction and it's set in space on another planet. And the initial concept of these three books is that something has happened to the Earth. They're terraforming other planets. They initially attempt to seed this other planet with um, with life, and particularly simian life, that they hope will then massively evolve to the point where they'll be able to carry on the legacy of humanity. But something goes wrong, and it ends up actually happening to spiders instead. And so it's this series where you've got a couple humans, some humans left, and you've got this evolutionary chronology of how these spiders come to amass uh, civilization and all kinds of things. And it's very interesting seeing the idea of civilization and evolution through something we don't really think about much, which are spiders. It's quite good.
Awesome.
Parts of it are real dark, but it's very interesting. How about
Super
you?
cool. I've got a few. There are two songs that I kind of like thought about as far as like a playlist for this book. One is called "I Hear Music." The jazz, it's a jazz song, and the person's just kind of talking about how like they hear music in like the like pot boiling on the stove and like people like running up the stairs and stuff like that. And it's such a great reminder that like our whole concept of music is constructed, and like we can see all of these little things as a great reminder of things to be happy about. There's also the Daft Punk song Technologic. I
Mm.
felt was like also very very fitting for this because it's all that create it's all like all of that technological creativity in something that is very much like that's not like Daft Punk's not hard science, and I just absolutely like loved that as a theme together. I have one recommendation as far as like a comic book. It is a semi autobiographical book called Blank Canvas by Akiko Higashimura. And it's about her time in art school. And I just felt that there were lots of things discussing kind of creativity and collaboration and teaching and learning that were really cool that kind of reminded me of this book. The last one is actually a nonfiction book called Quackery. It is about all of the ways that people thought medicine was good or thought medicine was a good idea. And what I loved about this is kind of like a contrast to the creative spark is it's like all the ways that humans have been creative, unfortunately to our detriment. And it's such a fantastic exploration of like all of the things that we thought were good ideas and were definitely not. And it's just it's so honest about it and so fun, and also it kind of like reminds us that like creativity is it's not necessarily bad when we fail, but it's definitely something that we can both celebrate the failures and the successes. And it's a really great book. There are like lots of content warnings for like medical and body stuff because it does get very graphic at certain points in time. But it's a very kind of fun book. It also explores some idioms that we have that are out of that like old medical traditions, as well as like all your favorite sodas were previously medicinal. Fun. And that's why certain things have certain prefixes and things. But it's a really fun book in its absurdity. um, I guess with that, do you have any concluding words or closing thoughts about the book, Megan?
I really enjoyed it. I think that it is a good piece for folks who are non archaeologists. I think it's also a good piece for folks like me who are non hard science archaeologists. It definitely, parts of it took me back to my undergraduate days and learning all the different trees of lineage. Good book. Folks should read it.
Awesome.
How about you?
Well, yeah, I think that folks should just enjoy reading it. Maybe read it with a friend. Read it in a book club. I also the audiobook is really nice. I would say that it's narrated by the author, and he does a really good job, even though he's not a professional voice actor. And it's a really nice experience. So with that, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this book today, Megan.
Thank you, Paulina.